Senator Whish-Wilson.
This is a very special Senator's statement for me today, Madam Acting Deputy President. I've just passed my sixth year in this place officially, and nearly 6 years ago, as a new senator, I did my first, what was then called a senator's statement. It's now a matter of public interest. I did my first statement on the threat, the growing threat of marine plastics or plastics in our oceans. And I understand it was the first speech that had ever been given in this place on the issue of plastic pollution in our oceans. And when I gave that speech 6 years ago, the issue of marine plastic pollution was not yet seen by many people as a major environmental threat, but it's certainly something I'd been campaigning on for many years before I came into Parliament. And I mentioned two scientists at the time, Dr Jen Lavers and Dr Denise Hardesty, who were amongst a small group of scientists that had begun to sound the alarm about what was going on in our oceans. And since that time, through continued research and publications, the importance and urgency of this issue has now become mainstream and has risen to be seen as one of the great environmental challenges of our time globally. And this gives me some heart, how quickly things are progressing. But I want to say here today that there's so much more we have to do, and we need some real political leadership and action. Now, the oceans cover nearly 70% of the Earth's surface, and Madam Deputy President, I remember your first speech and how you reflected on the importance of oceans to your community. But they account for 99% of all the habitable space for life on this planet. And I understand why so many people simply assume that through their sheer size and majesty that they're impregnable to our human actions, but they're not. Thanks to us, the ocean is fast becoming broken. And if you want to see heartbreaking testimony to this, then please watch a film called Albatross by a filmmaker, Chris Jordan. This is a powerful and very moving testimony to our broken, increasingly broken relationship with nature. You go to the island of Midway Atoll. You live with the albatrosses through this movie. Because they have no natural predators, the filmmaker was able to live with them, and he spent 8 years filming these beautiful birds. And every atom and every molecule in those birds over millions of years of evolution has come from subsisting from the ocean. And now, sadly, these birds are collecting plastic every time they fly out into the ocean, and they're feeding that to their chicks, and they're dying in their thousands. And this is a story that's repeated for our shearwaters off the Tasmanian and east coast of Australia, and for so many other marine species, turtles, whales, dolphins. It's a really, really serious issue. But that movie, Albatross, is a very, very powerful testimony, and it's really important to frame up this issue and make people understand what we are doing. In fact, the filmmaker postulates that Midway is halfway between the two great continents in the Pacific Ocean, and that if we don't change the way we live, we're halfway to our own destruction as a species. Now, people don't understand that plastic pollution comes from our behaviour. Someone recently called it I better pronounce this correctly, the detritus of humanity. And plastic pollution is like the dandruff that the human species shed into the environment as we get on with our daily lives. So it's plastic bags, it's straws, it's Chupa Chup holders, it's a whole range of things that make their way into the oceans as litter stream, and then they break down and have very serious negative impacts. And I understand how something seemingly so small is difficult to imagine would have such a big impact on something as large as our oceans, and essentially become an existential threat to life and species on this planet. I'll give you two reasons why. One is we produce so much of the bloody stuff, so much of it. The world produces 400 million tonnes of plastic every year, and around 8 million tonnes of that is estimated to go into the ocean. That's expected to triple. That's expected to triple in the next 20 years. One recent study of microplastics, which of course all plastic ends up as microplastics, small bits of plastic, small enough to get into plankton. One recent study showed that as of current 2014, there are an estimated to be 51 trillion pieces of microplastics in the ocean. We are finding it in plankton in the Antarctica. We are finding plankton all through our ocean. Our ocean is turning into a plastic soup. Now, the message is every little thing you can do helps to reduce plastic pollution, especially the way you live, reduce, refuse, reuse, redesign. But my message today is it won't be enough to tackle this problem. We need hundreds of millions of people doing the same thing at the same time if we're actually going to beat this issue. And that requires political action, not just here in Australia, but globally. And that's really what I wanted to talk to you about today. Now, since I made my first speech on this in 2012, we have had a very successful Senate inquiry. Senator Urquhart's in here today, and I thank her for her participation in this inquiry into marine plastics. And we released a great report, groundbreaking, first parliament in the world to do this. It was called Toxic Tide, and it raised a lot of eyebrows. It got international media attention. And I will point out today the government has yet to respond to that report that's over 2 years old. But it's done a lot. It's crystallised a lot of action around this country. We've now seen, for example, container deposit schemes implemented in New South Wales, close to being implemented in Queensland and Western Australia. And we're seeing a gradual move towards banning of microbeads and plastic bags and other key recommendations. Yet, the government is still asleep at the wheel on many of the key recommendations in that report. I would also like to say today that the science around marine plastic in recent years has been driving this debate, but we need so much more of it, and we need it to be properly funded. And this was a key recommendation from the Senate report. The Greens have recommended a cooperative research centre, 5 years of government funding, backed by industry and stakeholders all around the world, throw the kitchen sink at this problem. And it's not just understanding the impacts of marine plastic, it's looking at research and development on the solutions that are necessary for this to go ahead, and that will need industry participation. For example, how do we phase out single-use plastics? Because that is what's coming around the corner. We desperately need this research to help inform the debate and hopefully the best way to take action. Now, since this speech again, 6 years ago, long campaigning Healthy Ocean champions have had some powerful allies join us in our campaigns for healthy oceans. I list the Queen, who's recently come on board with this issue as being a champion of healthy, clean oceans. Sir David Attenborough, with his Blue Planet series, has made a massive impact on this. So public attention has grown through programs also like the ABC's War on Waste. And I'd like to make a special call out today to the producer of that program, Stephen Oliver, and his team. You have made a real difference in the Australian public's understanding and awareness of this issue. But the Australian government, on the other hand, hasn't. Like with its approach to all major environmental issues, it has done virtually nothing to tackle plastic pollution. We're currently having a Senate inquiry, which I won't go into yet, into the waste crisis in this country, but I'm optimistic, and I'm chairing that inquiry, that we'll get some really good recommendations to back up the Toxic Tide report on how industry and all Australians can make a difference in this respect. But we need the government to immediately respond to the Senate report, and we need a threat abatement plan, because under EPBC law, marine plastics are classified as a threatening process. But that threat abatement plan has not been released by the government yet, another critical area where they've fallen short. But look at what the rest of the world's doing. Only last week we had the G7 leaders of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, the United Kingdom and European Union sign a Healthy Oceans Plastic Charter at their recent summit. We've had a UN Environmental Assembly pass a resolution to tackle plastic waste and marine litter in their December 2017 Nairobi meeting. We've had both the UK and the EU trying to outdo each other. The leaders of both of those countries are having a war on waste. They are taking each other on as to who can reduce single-use plastics the most. Where is Australia? We have not responded to any of these international developments. Now, Madam Acting Deputy President, Australia is a nation girthed by sea. Australians love the ocean. Why aren't we a world leader in taking on this most critical of issues? We've got the scientists, we've got the technology, and we have the vested interest in healthy oceans. And I think most Australians would be on board with some strong action. Now, while plastic pollution needs local and international responses, I would like to raise here today that if we really want to phase out single-use plastics and deal with the major issue that we have in our ocean pollution, we should look at a Montreal Protocol type agreement, which we know was successful in putting into phase the plan to phase out CFCs to save the ozone layer. We need to actually lead a collaborative international action and join the rest of the world and show leadership on this most critical of issues.